Okay. Share my screen. So mainly we've been learning about STLC for a while. And we finished pretty much everything. Execution of system test we have done. We have done identifying and logging defects, tracking defects, and we are learning about how to perform different type of testing. And then we'll talk about, I don't know if we talked about analysis report and meetings, but we'll talk about it briefly. So moving on to our topic of the day, which is different type of testing. Let me know if you're able to see my screen. If it's readable, do I need to zoom in or we're good to go?
It's perfect.
Okay, perfect. So, these are all type of testing we can identify. There might be others, but these are the testing known in the industry and popular. The ones highlighted, I will talk about them, why those are highlighted, but let's just go over them quickly. And if those of you watch the video, you should have some idea by now. All right, so let's go over them. So we have under all type of testing, we have unit testing, shakeout testing, smoke testing, functional testing, integration testing, regression testing, system testing, load testing, stress testing, performance testing, UAT testing, black box testing, white box testing, alpha testing, beta, ad hoc, end-to-end, sanity, backend security, usability, compatibility, rehost, DUI testing, monkey pilot recovery testing. So these are 28 different type of testing listed here. Out of that, 2 of them are highlighted in yellow. Those are 2 type of testing performed by developers. We as a QA, we do not perform these 2 testing, unit and integration. The reason being, these 2 testing perform in the code level, right? We test in the application level, and these 2 testings done in the code level. So if you look at an application, it could be any application. So let's say, all right, so if we even go to our Google Classroom, right? That's an application itself, right? So if we're looking at this is an application. If you and I as a tester we're about to perform testing here on this application, we'll be doing on the UI level testing. We'll be doing functional testing, but we will not go in the backend. When I say backend, I meant in the code level, code repository. We will not go to code and perform our testing. But when it comes to unit and integration testing, these 2 testing perform in the code level itself. They will not look at they will not look at the UI. They'll just go into code and perform those testing. All right, so I hope you understand the difference. Now, apart from those, the ones written in red, just simply ignore them. It's there, but no one uses it, no one talks about it, no one really cares about those. The shakeout and monkey and pilot and recovery testing. You won't even hear about it in the industry, so ignore them. Apart from that, let's understand the rest. Right, so these are all different type of testing that we have identified. So now if let's move on from this and talk about the next area here. So from all of this, right, we have 2 main type of testing. One is black box testing, another one is white box testing. And if you look at it, white box is part of is testing the code itself. When you go to the job market, sometimes you will see, they are looking for white box testers or mix. Someone knows black box and white box testing. So that happens very rarely. So when they're looking for a tester that knows black box and white box, that's mean they're looking for someone who has development experience, someone who can write codes, who can understand codes, and that type of testers. But 99.9% of the company, this testing is done by developers only. I've been in the industries for a long time. We never had to perform this testing. No one, not only that we never had to perform this testing, but no one would ask you to do unit testing. You, as a QA, you should ask developers when they're sending you, when they're giving you builds, you should ask them, hey, did you perform unit testing? What was your code coverage? So code coverage meaning, let's say if they have written like 10 test cases or 10 functionality, did the unit code covers all 10 functionalities or the test cases? So they need to make sure there's a standard in the company. It varies company to company. For my company, our unit test coverage should be 85%, 80 to 85%. They must cover 85% with their unit test. If they don't, we can reject the build. Let me see if I can show you an example. In some cases, I will be able to show you an example of what is unit test and what is the coverage of unit test. Let me see. Okay, so it's showing quality gate. Okay, I think I should be, yeah, it's showing quality gate pass, meaning it is more than 80% the threshold. But let me see. In Sonar Cloud, I don't have access to Sonar Cloud. Okay, should show somewhere here. Okay, so this is a little bit technical. Don't get twisted with this. So basically, under coverage, I think here it should have shown that percentage. So this is an automated process. Basically, they have done unit testing with they have written some automated code, and we have a gate here is going to tell them like, hey, if you had covered more than 80% or not. So this one is passing this particular repository, but it's not showing the percentage. So if I go to, let me see if there's another project that I can show you. Yes. React. And guys, don't worry about this thing because yeah, this is also view full metrics. Yeah, here you go. So look at the code coverage, 85%, exactly what we want. The gate is passing here. 13 bugs, 0.2% duplicate. Code smells 727. So what it means, like you in reality, you'll never have to touch this, but I'm showing you what unit tests look like and how they cover the percentage that we have asked them to cover, basically. So again, this is code level testing, so you don't have to perform the testing. All we want from quality assurance perspective, we are saying, hey, you have developed a functionality. Now we want you to do your internal testing before you send it to us. So this is just as part of this code coverage only. Because if they're coding something and not doing the internal testing, this means this code could be very buggy. An application might be not in the shape that we want it to be. So that's why we make sure that they perform their internal testing and that threshold is passing, and then only they can push it to us. So I hope you understand. If you have any questions, please let me know.
I have a question.
Yes, brother.
So, if every company has a different percentage of what you just show, so like coverage, so is it different or is always be the 85%?
No, it varies depending on the company, how they want to set the standards.
Oh, okay, that's the question. Thank you, brother.
Okay. Yeah. So, don't worry too much about this thing right now. This is something, if you're working in a good company, they care for the quality of the software and they have process in place, that's when you will see this kind of standards in place. Otherwise, no one really cares. But good to know this, good to understand this. Not only you don't perform unit testing, you make sure you let developers know that they're performing unit testing. That's something that you could definitely, make sure that they're performing. So unit testing is pretty much testing the code as a whole. On the other hand, integration testing, developers are testing the code to make sure different part of the application working individually as well as communicating with each other. What I mean by that, right? If you go to, let's say if you go to Gmail, right? You have any application, right? It doesn't have to be Gmail. You have so many components, right? You have, let's just say, different mailbox, right? Each one of them has their own code bases. Now, as part of the integration testing, they have to make sure, like, is the inbox working individually? Is that inbox connected? If it requires to connect with any other module, is it communicating with that module? Things like that. So that's integration testing, and it's also developers. It's not you and I. We don't perform that testing. All right. So that's unit and integration, and that's not our responsibility. That falls into developers. I hope it's clear. And the category of testing is white box testing, right? And we are not white box tester. We are black box tester. So moving into black box testing, I hope you're able to segregate two different type of main testing: black box and white box. So coming into black box, we're going to ignore shakeout testing. Starting with smoke testing is very, very important, and it's very fast, very, very first testing that you perform. Whenever an application given to you, you perform smoke testing. There's an interview question as well, right? They may ask you, when do you perform smoke testing? Or they may ask you, what is the very first testing you perform in an application? So the answer is smoke testing. Smoke testing, so whenever a build is given to you, you just need to make sure that build is stable. And how do you make sure? How do you ensure it's stable? You simply go into an application. In our case, right, we have Mercury Tour application. Let's say they give you a bill. Now you just need to go to a fresh browser and make sure that this application works. You're just going to go in. How do you perform smoke test? You're just going to go in and make sure that application is loading. You're able to navigate to different component of this application. You're able to log in. You're able to go into different component and see if it's working. It's clickable. So that's smoke testing. That's very much simple. And the definition will be given to you, but I'm just saying right there. So smoke testing is the very first testing you perform in an application after a build is received to make sure the main functionality of that application is working fine, right? Now moving into functional testing. Functional testing is very detail level testing. You're testing pretty much each and every functionality of that application to make sure it's working as expected. So if you're performing functional testing, you are so if you're performing functional testing in this application, or let's just say in the home page. So this is home page. Everything you see here, which is supposed to function, which is supposed to do something, you are performing testing on that end to end, beginning to ending. Every single function you'll be testing. So that's functional testing. Okay. Now, regression testing. Regression testing is very, very popular, is the most popular, one of the most popular testing in the industry. Every tester must have experience in regression. Usually, I would like to, or everyone likes to automate regression testing, but let's understand what is regression testing. So regression testing is retesting an application after any modification to make sure that application works fine. Meaning, right, you have an application in place. So let's say you have a username field was working fine, but there was an issue with password field. Now they fixed the password field and you have retested it and it's working fine. Similarly, like, let's say there's another issue somewhere else in this page and they have made that changes or fixed it, and you retested it and it's working fine. Now you have to perform a regression testing before you sign off on this application or on this release. You need to perform a regression testing, which is to make sure that not only that bug fix was done, but everything else that was impacting before of that fix is working fine. So what happens is sometimes, like, developers, let's say they fix something, but in the process of it, they break something else. And the reason being, right, when they're writing codes, it's like, they're writing line by line. So if they're touching one line and it is doing something in multiple places, some of you probably know, like, there is a lot of reusable functions and codes in the repository, and they use them all across. So meaning they can write a function, and if they need the same function somewhere else, they will use it instead of rewriting that function. There is no duplicacy in that in the industry. You want to write the code in a way that you could reuse them in any places that you need. So, which is a very, very good thing. But what happens sometimes, like, when something breaks in one place, the chances are it's going to break in all other areas where this code was utilized. So that's one reason why, like, code breaks. And another reason, like, if it's simply a coding error, or simply they fixed something but they broke something, and it happens a lot. So that's why we have regression testing in place, and we have to perform regression testing to make sure that nothing is broken after that fix. So ideally, like, when you're signing off, like you and I will be working on a project, but when we are working in a sprint, right? You all know what is sprint, and how the standard is each sprint is 2 weeks. So right before, let's say Friday is our last day of sprint, Friday itself or Thursday, we will perform a regression testing end to end, to make sure that application is good, is stable, there's no bugs in that application. Before we sign off, if you have any questions about sign off and what is sign off, let's talk about it. But I'm assuming all of you know what is sign off. And that could be a interview question. What is QA sign off? So if you don't know, let me know. Now, before you sign off on that project or release or sprint, you need to make sure you're performing regression testing manually or via some automated tool to make sure that everything works fine before you sign off on that particular sprint or project. So that's regression testing. System testing. So system testing is pretty much everything, right? What is a system? And we'll talk about, later as you get more understanding about each one of them. So system testing, what is system, right? At the very first day, I hope you guys remember, we talked about what is an application, what is a system and whatnot. Essentially, they're same different way of calling them out. Basically, a system is nothing but the application that you are working under. So in our case, this is our system, right? So when we're performing system testing, we are performing the system the testing system as an entirety. And similar thing I said about functional testing, right? But there is a huge difference, which I will explain later. So system, this application is as a whole is a system. Everything in this application is a system. And when we test everything in this application, that it automatically becomes system testing. And when I said everything, I meant functional testing, non-functional testing, database testing, everything as a whole. So that's system testing. Then comes load testing. Load testing is testing the application to see how much load that application can take, right? This is part of non-functional testing, meaning functionally that application is working fine, but can we see how much load that application can take? And what is load in software terminology? Load is nothing but adding more users, sending more user to that application at the same time to see, does that application works fine with one user versus whatever the maximum number that we want to test with. And there must be a requirement saying my application should take this many users. So, if you take an example, so we have Facebook, everybody knows Facebook. Every single country in this world knows Facebook and uses them, I guess, except for North Korea or China. But everybody logs onto Facebook, right? You and I, do we have idea how many thousands or millions of people using Facebook at the same time? We don't, but their developers know exactly how many people logging into that application at the same time. What is the maximum hit? What is the minimum hit? What is the capacity their application have? Everything is in place. So we, as a tester, whenever we're working on that particular project, we should know what is the limit of our application, and we should be monitoring them, that what is the maximum we are hitting, are we facing any issues, things like that. So that's load testing. Stress testing is similar to load testing, but this is finding out where is the bottleneck, where we are breaking, exact point, breaking point with the load, basically. And this two testing is under performance testing. That's a different category itself. We'll talk about it here somewhere, right? So moving into UAT testing, so user acceptance testing. So I hope you guys have some idea about UAT testing. We had the UAT gate when we covered the STLC diagram and things like that, right? Remember we had use UAT phase, user acceptance tester phase, where user brings in their testers and they perform a testing there to make sure that that application is working fine and whatnot. So basically, UAT testing is done by a third-party tester or client's tester. We don't perform UAT testing, but in some cases we support UAT tester. So that's a different group of people comes in and perform testing from the client side. We are not responsible for UAT, but there's an environment. We talked about different type of environments, right? QA environment, dev environment, UAT environment, production environment. So UAT has their own environment, meaning when we receive the code in QA, let me give you an example. I have given an example multiple times, but let me show you. Look, this is a dev environment. Let me know, guys, if you're seeing this screen. This is a dev environment. This is QA environment. You can see QA written in the URL. This is a pre-prod. Pre-prod is nothing but UAT. So UAT is right before production environment. So some companies, it's known to some companies as pre-prod, some companies as UAT. So it's same thing. So pre-prod, see, pre-prod. This is a separate environment, and then we have production environment. In production, you will not see the word dev QA or pre-prod written or even production written. It is a direct URL and it is client exposed URL. So it's usually nicer, right? So going back to pre-prod. So what happens? So this is how the code travels, right? First, it gets developed in dev environment, and dev, they do their own type of testing. Once that is done, they will send it to QA. They'll literally push it to QA. Do you guys want to see how that deployment done? I can show you that as well, but you will not perform that. Trust me. There are developers usually do that, or DevOps who does this. But in my company, I do this exercise. And the reason I do it, it's going to get complicated. So I just don't want to give you guys too much information, but I do it because I would like to control it when I want to push the next build, when I think I just want to control it. That's why I do it. It's just simple as that. And I don't want to have any dependencies on dev, constant communication. Hey, I need a build now, or hey, I don't want a build now, don't send me a build, things like that. So, but usually it's a very smooth process. They will give you a build whenever they complete certain percentage of code or they build something. So let's go into the Jira. Guys, if I'm going too fast, let me know. If you're confused, feel free to ask questions. So this is our active board. We have all of these tickets, right? Let's say if devs, they complete, so this is already in QA, ready for QA, meaning they already provided this build, so we don't have to worry about this. So let's say this is in code review. So let's say they complete this one and they think, all right, this is going to take some time. We'll just push this to QA. So that they will, for me, they will just push it to dev environment, which is this environment. Dev environment. They'll just push it here, and they don't need to communicate with me because I can go and check. So I'll go to my project in Bitbucket. Should I go to? Okay, so I'll just simply go to my project, my repository. I'll look into the commit. I'll look into the branch, and please ignore all of this. You will not be dealing with this. So I will look into the code that they checked in. So here, obviously this is a weekend. So the last time they did any codes check is 4 days ago. if I were to push this to QA environment from dev, I'll just simply, we have a pipeline in place, so automated system, basically, when I say pipeline. So I'll just create a tag and then push it to QA, which I will not do right now. I don't need that build, but let me see if I can show you in Circle CI. A lot of failure. I haven't made a build for a long time. Just give me a second, guys. And ignore all of this. This is just for the knowledge purpose. You will not perform this. All right, so ignore this. I'll show you some other time. I haven't made any deployment for 3-4 days, and it's kind of lost in this repository right now. I won't be able to find it. The process that I wanted to show you. Okay, so this one failed, maybe. Let's see. Okay, so look at this process right here. This is what I wanted to show you, but it failed here. But ignore this failure. So this is an automated process, right? Whenever we trigger a build, it goes in the background and set up the credentials, and then it builds the QA build, and then it deploys to QA, and it does this scans, these two scans to make sure that it is passing those two gates. These are nothing but gates. And once it does, it will move to, so deployment is pretty much done at this point here, and it will prepare the build for the next environment, which is, so basically it's traveling from this dev environment to QA, and pretty much at this point, the QA is done, deployment is done. Now is preparing for the next environment, which is a pre-prod right here, and saying that, you know, QA is done. We are updating Jira for QA and getting ready for pre-prod environment to make the promotion, to promote it basically. But I don't want to do it. I want to make sure that, you know, my code is fine here. I want to make sure that it's working fine, and I'll spend a couple of days here to make sure there's no bugs. And if there are bugs, we log them, we fix them. And once everything is done, that's when I'll go in and say, okay, I want to move to pre-prod. So yeah, that's the automated process in the background. Okay. All right, moving on from this. Let me know if you have any questions. All right, so this is UAT. We were talking about UAT, and I was showing you guys like how code travels from each environment to environment. All right, so then black box testing, right? Black box is nothing but everything here, right? We're talking black box only, right? Everything is black box testing, and definition for black box testing is testing testing an application without knowing internal code, without understanding the code, basically. So definition for black box testing is testing an application without understanding the code. That's not a nice thing to say. Maybe you can say something like testing the application on the functional level. Testing an application without understanding the code. That's actually the proper definition. White box testing is nothing but this. So definition for white box testing is testing application's code itself. Moving into alpha testing. So alpha testing is something happens post pre-prod, right? So when an application going to production, right before it goes to production, we perform alpha testing. We don't perform alpha testing. It's done by clients or group of third-party people to make sure that that application works fine. There is no when I say work, they're looking into the look and feel of that application. If everything makes sense, they're usually involving external people to get feedbacks to see. So this is done, not by industry people. They usually involve outsider to get kind of feedback. It's very similar to beta testing. Beta testing is done in production, but with limited group of people get access to application. And I'm sure you guys are familiar with the terminology called beta version, meaning something is sent to production but has limited access. Limited people have access to it, and they let them use it to kind of use and provide feedback. Yeah, so alpha and beta is pretty similar. Alpha focuses on more on the look of it, whereas beta is performed in production as an entire application is given to limited use of users to use and provide feedback. Next is ad hoc testing. Ad hoc is pretty important testing. So ad hoc testing is performed randomly. Ad hoc is nothing but a random testing. And this is the only testing does not have sets of test cases. That's also an interview question, right? They could ask you, does ad hoc testing requires test cases? The answer is no. So this is the only testing that you should not have any test cases for when you're performing this testing. This is very similar to smoke testing, but all you're doing randomly testing that application to make sure that is working fine. So end-to-end testing. End-to-end testing is performing that application is more like functional testing. This is like A to Z testing. You're performing testing on the application from beginning to ending, making sure everything works fine. Sanity testing. So sanity testing is similar to regression testing. The definition is retesting an application after any modification to make sure that is working fine. Only difference is, Sanity is smaller version of regression. Sanity is not performed in the application, not in entire application. So sanity testing is performed in a part of application, meaning I was giving you an example about, so let's say, you have username and password field, right? So let's say there's an issue in password field and they fix it, you'll perform a sanity testing. If there is no other, fix is done or no other impacts are done, you're only performing sanity testing on this area, right? So they fix the password field, you'll test username field as well. And I would think username and password, and I would think that you perform testing on the sign-in page as well, because username and password directly related to sign-in functionality. So instead of regression testing is a huge testing, guys. So you have to understand when to perform it and when to avoid it. For regression testing, you might have hundreds of test cases versus sanity testing. You might need 2-3 scenarios to cover. So sanity testing is specific target specific functionality depending on the impact. So when a developer provides a fix, you could ask them like, hey, what are the impacted areas? If you're not understanding where to perform the testing, you can ask them like, hey, what are the impacted areas? Where should I perform the regression or sanity testing? All right, so just understand sanity and regression very similar. Sanity is smaller version of regression, targets specific area. Backend testing. Backend testing is testing the database, right? Every application has a database where they store their data, and you need to connect to that database and perform a test to make sure the database is connected, it's storing the data. For example, right, if you do register, right, if you register in this application, let's say you enter all of your information here, where does it go? Like as soon as you hit submit, it disappears. Where does it go? Right? It is stored in database. And how is it stored in database? In a table format. They will have a table where they will have a first name, like everything you see here. They'll have a table with first name column, last name, phone number, email, address. Everything you're entering here, it is stored in the backend, in the database. So when you register an individual here, you'll go into the database and make sure you'll query that person name and make sure that everything you entered here, it is stored there against that person name or the email address to make sure it is stored. So that's your database testing. Security testing. So that's very, very important. And it's very, very important to understand what is security testing. So basically security testing to make sure that that application is secured, that no one is able to hack that application, things like that. So there are different level of security testing. We are responsible to perform security testing in the application level. So there are network level security as well. That is done usually by third parties, and we are not responsible for that. But we need to make sure that we're testing each and every scenarios, each and every combination to make sure that application is not breaking. So especially when it comes to accessing that application, how do you access that application? By logging in. How do you log in? By creating and registering. And now as a hacker, they'll avoid it because they will not have access to that application. So how would they hack it? They'll try to use different combination, different way of breaking that application, like registering an application. If we don't perform enough testing, thorough testing, then there are cases, right? They could avoid registering, but they could log in, things like that. I mean, nowadays it doesn't happen. Every company has checks and balances in place. to make sure to avoid that functional security testing, but there are cases, it happens, right? So we need to make sure that we are performing enough testing on that application to avoid such scenarios. All right, usability testing. So this is done automatically. This is not something that you have to perform different type of testing, but it happens, right? Automatically. So this is the definition, is to make sure that the application is usable, operable, and user friendly. Meaning when you're creating an application, it should be organized in a way that is easy to understand. But right now you may think that's kind of silly, right? Any application is operable, but not really. Once their application, it requires demos and guidance to operate. Right? Like this kind of application is simple, right? When you're working in a project, their application very, 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 very complex. So you need to, as a tester, like, you could provide suggestions like, hey, this could have been like this, or you could provide the suggestion. It's up to them to take it or not. So basically, is that application user friendly or not? That's all. Like, I mean, this 22 should not be here. Compatibility testing. So compatibility testing is nothing but cross-browser testing. You guys understand what is a browser, and so making sure that application is compatible in different browsers and different browser versions if they require different versions of the browser. So let's talk about different browsers, right? We have no more IE, I guess. We have Edge, we have Firefox, we have Safari, we have other browsers, right? We have 6, 7 major browsers. So if your application is supposed to support multiple browsers, we need to, and which is 99.9% of the time, we are all the application must be supporting multiple browsers, and we just need to test them in different browsers to make sure that these applications are working fine in different browsers. Now, each browser have different versions. Now, this is where things gets complicated. Do we need to make sure that our application is tested in different version of browsers? Probably not. That's something that has to be a requirement coming from the business. Okay. Let me see if I can find an example. No, yeah, right here. There you go. So for our company, guys, are you still with me, or is it getting too much? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we're still here.
All right, good. Okay, so let's look at this. Browser support here. We're saying I'm just showing an example, and this is a real non-functional requirement. So by Q3 2022, we are supposed to support current version of Chrome, Safari, Edge, Firefox. End of 2022, we're going to support current version and plus one version back. That's the goal, end of 2022, Chrome, Safari, Edge, and Firefox. So we're saying, okay, we're going to support current version of Chrome, whatever that version is, and a version back. So if you go under setting, you can probably see what is the current version of an browser. It should be somewhere here. About, under about, you should see that this is the current version 1.70 blah blah blah, right? And there is a version back which is, you know, ends with 34. This is 35, it ends with 34. So we're targeting this version plus one version back. That's what we're saying here. End of this year. End of 2023, all existing browser support requirement, including in-app messaging, things like that. So this is kind of the rough goal of our application. And here we're talking about different screen size that we're going to support. And cybersecurity is not us. It's a different team. Like I was talking about security testing in network level. This is what I was talking about. This is not us. Compliance, privacy. There is these are for disability people to support their needs and things like that. Performance optimization. Okay, don't get too much into these things. This is more high level stuff. I see there's a question, Brother Abdus.
Kadir, I was just curious, right? When it comes to checking different browsers, right? So let's say you're using a computer that doesn't have Safari, then how do you make sure that it works on Safari? Like for your computer, for example, like I don't think we have Safari, so how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, thank you. This is a very good question. There are two ways of doing it. Obviously, you need to have one way of doing it. What we do, so what I ask my guys to do, like, you know, when you're, so we have like 4 or 5 QA. So I said, you know, person A test on Chrome only, person B do test on Edge, person C test on Safari, and person C Firefox, things like that, CD. So that way, like, you know, cross-browser testing is done automatically. And obviously, you have to have Safari computer or Apple computer or something like that in place. That's one thing. The other thing is there are third-party tools does those for you. So there's a tool I know, it's called multi-browser tool, and this has everything there, all the browsers, all the browser version there. So you could just go into that tool and do all your cross-browser testing. And usually, if you're not performing cross-browser testing with different individual performing different in different browsers, you save it for last. You do all your testing, and at the end you perform your cross-browser testing. So that's one way. Another way of automating it, right? You know, we have automation in place. We have automation in place, right? You know, you could do Selenium or something else, and you write those code prior to, you know, execution, and then that code will do your job and automate it and give you result. That's one way. There's another tool called Browser Stack tool. That tool also does really good job. So Browser Stack is not free. It's a paid program, so your company has to subscribe to that. So there are multiple ways of doing it, basically. I'm sorry, I cannot understand. Is there a question? Okay, so basically it depends on the requirement, and if the requirement is given from your company, they should support it. So what I'm saying it, either they go buy the tool for you, or they give you an Apple laptop, something like that. But you as a tester, you should be able to automate it if you know automation and to solve this problem. All right, it's 10:30, getting late, so let's continue. We were in compatibility, right? And rehost testing, you will not perform this one. So here testing, testing in different environment, basically different computer environment, one operating system to another operating system, basically. Yeah, ignore that rehost testing. But this is important: GUI testing, graphical user interface testing, basically. This is nothing but testing the UI portion of it to see like how look and feel. And as I mentioned, 26, 27, 28, ignore it. We will never perform this testing. All right, so moving on. So we covered black box and white box. And hopefully we understand the difference between black box and white box. Now, under the black box testing, we have system testing. Like I said before, system is everything as a whole. All right, and if you understand this chart right here, if you understand this area right here, you understand everything. I'll take a moment here to understand this. So here we separated, we have everything, all type of testing together, and then we separate them in two different types of testing. One is black box, one is white box. We're narrowing it down, right? Under one, all type of testing, we separated two types, black box and white box, and we only focus on black box testing. Now we're going to narrow it down even furthermore. We're going to go into black box testing. Under black box testing, we have system testing. Under system testing, we have two types of testing, functional and non-functional. And we are mainly responsible to perform functional testing. So see how it's becoming easier and easier. You need to worry about less and less. So system testing, like I said before, when you perform functional and non-functional testing, it automatically becomes system testing. So this is your system, and that requires you to perform functional and non-functional testing. Once you perform all of this testing under functional and non-functional, it automatically becomes system testing. So now let's look at what are different type of testing under functional testing. So under functional testing, we have smoke testing, regression testing, black box. We shouldn't really write black box here. We'll just delete it. Black box is the entirety, right? So ignore this one. But smoke testing, regression testing, ad hoc testing, end-to-end testing, sanity testing, backend testing, security, usability, compatibility, rehost, and GUI. These are your testing under functional testing. And what is functional testing? Functional testing, if you don't understand by now, is testing the functionality of application. When you look at this, right, each and every function needs to be tested. That is nothing but functional testing. And how do you perform it? By performing different type of testing. Now, non-functional testing. What is non-functional testing? Testing the load of that application. How much load does the application test? How fast that application runs when you're adding more and more load into that application, and where does that application break? So that's your non-functional testing. And here you are testing this application. You are not checking if that application works or not. All you're checking, how many users can I add to that application, and how does that application reacts. That's all you're testing. And under this, we have three types of testing, right? Load, stress, and performance. There are many more, but these are the main ones. We don't need to worry about that. Do we understand, guys? Let's talk a little bit. Do we understand like what is black box testing? What is white box? What is system? What is functional? What is non-functional? These are different categories of testing. These are different, these are like parent level stuff that you need to understand.
I have one question, Kadir.
Sure.
When we perform this kind of testing during executing our test cases, that time we perform, or this is the separate time for perform this testing?
Sorry, I was muted. So these are part of your test cases only. You're writing test cases for all of this, and except for ad hoc testing. Like I mentioned, ad hoc testing does not require test cases. When you're executing your test cases, you will be performing your functional testing and regression testing and smoke testing and all of this. And for non-functional testing, you'll be doing the same as well. Let me see if I have an example of. So if I go to testing board, if I go to testing board, I should have our test cases written here. The trick is you really don't have to testing board. What happened? Yeah, while I'm doing this, I see another question. Is brother Abdus
All right, so Kadir, I'm a bit confused, right? Because from the middle chart, it seems like all those tests are under black box testing, but then it seems as if black box testing is a whole different testing by itself also.
No, I like I said, this should not be here. We'll just delete this. This should not be here. I already
So all
mentioned
these
that.
are under black box testing then.
So black box testing is testing all of this, performing all of this,
Okay.
right? Black box testing is testing an application without knowing the code, right? And under this black box, we have system testing, right? Under system testing, we have functional and non-functional testing. So that's how you kind of separate those out. Yeah, this black box was listed here by mistake. Does this make sense now?
Sort of, yeah.
Where is the confusion now?
Because like when I had previously looked up black box testing, like that also seemed like a testing just like the other ones, like sanity, smoke, etc.
No,
It didn't seem to
no,
be a
no, it's not. It's not. If someone explaining you that, that's wrong. So it's black box is a category of testing. It's not a type of testing. It's the entire category. Under that, you have all this testing,
okay.
different type of testing.
All right, that makes more sense. Thank you.
Yeah. I think we have another question. Brother Sultan.
Yes, Pai. So in actual work project, so the different type of testing. So do we do like individually or like I don't know how to explain it. So do you do multiple testing at the same time, or are you going to be like doing, let's say, smoke testing? Then when you're done with that, you'll be doing functional, then load testing, stress testing. Do it make sense what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, good question. So whenever you receive that application, you'll be performing smoke testing. That is a must, mandatory. You're performing smoke testing, making sure that it works fine. After that, right, things gets easy, not tricky, easy. You need to understand all of this, but you may or may not test you may or may not perform all of this type of testing. You'll once you do your smoke testing, you'll start functional testing. So when I say functional testing is nothing but performing all of this testing. Now, when you're writing your test cases, you're gonna write your test cases as a whole, so let's say you guys wrote test cases, right? You guys wrote test cases for different component, but did we say go ahead and write sanity testing test case? We didn't say that. We said, okay, let's just go and create test cases, but make sure you're covering the entirety of this, right? I think you have written test case for this, but we didn't say go write test case, smoke test case or sanity test case or regression test case. The goal is to cover everything, each and every function, bits and bits of this, right? Whatever you're writing test cases for. Now, once you write your test cases and it's in place, now smoke test, you're performing your smoke test, right? And then you just go into executing test cases, each and every one of them. And that falls under functional testing, right? Ignore non-functional for a second. Now, from that test cases, you'll identify some of them as regression test cases, some of them as end-to-end test cases, some of that as sanity test case. Backend test case, you will be writing backend test cases separately, but ignore that for a second. Security test case, usability, you will not worry about it. Compatibility test cases, which is the browser test cases, that's everything you have to test, right? You don't need to worry about it. Now, going into that, right, testing, your main focus would be on functional testing. I need to make sure everything works fine functionally. Everything works fine. That's what your focus in, and you'll be performing those testing, right? Now, when application matures up, when you have enough functionality in that application, you will create a folder. You'll create a folder, and that folder will call regression testing. And this is where you'll continue to add your regression test cases. I was trying to pull this here. Just allow me a second. Some reason it's not loading. Test. Give me 1 second. Test execution. And don't worry, guys. From next week, we should be able to exercise some of this. Something changed. Test repository. Okay. Okay. Let's look at this. Yes. right. So let me go back text. All right, so here, like you can see different folders here, right? So this is targeting. These are nothing but test cases. If you look at this folder, let me open FDS. This is targeting the functionality, right? When you're writing a test case, like right here, we are writing test cases for register page. We are not writing specific type of test cases. We are targeting the functionality as a whole. We're targeting, our goal is client does not care what type of testing you perform. They care, did you cover each and everything? Is each and everything tested? Does it cover everything? Does the application works fine or not? That's what everybody is worried about. Now, under this test repository, we are targeting the specific features that we are testing. Does it work fine or not? See, if you look at this, none of this says, okay, smoke test case or regression or and whatnot. But eventually, right, when your application is big enough, this is when you're going to create separate folder for smoke test. So you'll create a folder for smoke test, and under the smoke test, you'll identify 10, 15, 20 test cases, and that's going to be part of your smoke test. Every time when you receive a build, you want to make sure that you perform that test. Then you will perform, you'll create a folder called regression test. And in there, you will be adding your regression test cases, but you will never create all of these different folders. Like, for example, in the industry, you'll be having smoke test case folder, in regression test case folder, and backend. Where is the backend? Backend test case folder. And you may have like one folder called end-to-end, but everything else, ignore it. If you have in your project a smoke test case folder, regression test case folder, end-to-end test case folder, backend test case folder, you have very good process in place. You're good, you're organized, you're good to go. Usually there is test case written, functional test case, and everything is in one place, and which is fine. Is getting the job done. But if you want to be more organized, you have all the test cases in place, but you're separating your smoke test case folder, you're separating your regression test case folder, you have the database related testing in one place, you have end-to-end testing in place. If you're really organized, even for us, like you just saw, we don't have different folders. We have everything in one place, which is fine, getting the job done. But ideally, you should have at least smoke test, regression test, these two separated. Does it make sense?
Yes, it makes sense.
Great. I thought there was another question.
I had a question, Kadibai.
Yes, brother.
Well, two questions. One, like in a real work environment, when using Jira or whatnot, do we write out test cases like the way we did in the homework? And two, would it be possible to like see one of the test cases, how it's written out from like Jira, what you were showing us earlier?
Yeah. But not only see, you'll be writing test cases and you'll be having access from next week onward. So, but let me show you. So depending on your company, what they use, which tool they use, if it's Excel, you have Excel. We have done it, right? If it's Jira, you'll be performing those next week onward. So basically, you just, I'm trying to move this thing. Okay. I'll just go in here, right? And it'll create a test. Issue type as test, and you'll start writing it. And let me open this. This is a test case. if you open this, you have steps, right? You're writing scenario 1, enter. Basically, it's talking about special characters to the input field. You guys perform similar things. So you have steps, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have test data, whatever the test data, expected result is here, what you're expecting, and then actual result and everything else. You won't see it here. It's going to be under test execution when you're executing your test cases. So this is how this tool is configured, and you and I will be working on that next week onward, hopefully, if we're done with this.
Thank you.
Welcome, brother. All right, so what's next? So are we clear, guys? So function, at least, okay, I hope you're clear on function, non-functional testing. Now, non-functional testing, right? So we have load volume, we should have volume, load volume, and stress. So these are like, load to see how much load can application test take. Stress is to find out where that application breaks. And then performance, basically to see how fast that application works with heavy load. These are 3 main type of testing. This should cover everything. This is the end of it. Any questions, guys? Again, this is very, very crucial to understand. That's why I sent out that video recording the other day, and I have seen good number of people watch that video, which was pretty impressive. Good to see that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have a question from the start of the class. So you mentioned the QA sign-off. So the QA sign-off, is that end of every sprint, or is that when just before the release? Just